Welcome everyone to our second meeting. Today we're going to do a Figma intro, and at the end we're going to have a tutorial by a guest speaker who we'll introduce later on. But yeah, for today we're just going to get through and get started about introducing some of the softwares that are common used in industry for UX and UI designers. We're going to be doing that Figma intro that I was talking about in tips and tricks with a product designer here, Dorothy Kim. And then at the end, stick around around like 7 o'clock, we'll begin like our open feedback session. So that's really just a time for you guys. We'll open it up after every general meeting. If you guys want to come in, ask questions, just talk about design with like us, the officers, or like each other, and bring in like either your resumes or portfolios and kind of like get feedback if you want, or just like talk about like where to get started and stuff like that. So it's kind of a more like casual time to chat. And if you are here for that, then you can just stick around, and the meeting link is the same. We'll just stay here and go into breakout rooms. Okay. Okay, so first we're going to be talking about Illustrator versus Figma. So based on your guys' varying levels of experience in UI and UX, you might have only heard of like these design softwares, or you might already be like well versed in both of them. So we're going to be talking about like either way, the pros and cons that have to do with each of these softwares, and maybe where you would use either of them. So some of the pros to Illustrator is that it has a huge toolbox. This also I find can be a con because sometimes it's a little overwhelming, but essentially it's a huge toolbox that allows designers to create simple and intricate designs, illustrations, logos, icons, things like that, or like manipulate typography. It's also like use not just for like digital prints, but a lot of designers will use this to create things like brand books or like things that are made for like printing, media print, web, interactive video, or like mobile application. So really it has a lot of advanced capabilities and a lot of room to explore design. With Figma, it's very similar, but it's also a collaborative workspace. So this is like why in at least a lot of, depending on, again, where your skill levels are at, you might see or use Figma in a lot of your like design classes. But it's really easy. It's basically like the Google Docs for design. And it also has a lot of those same advanced capabilities, but if you ever used it before, then you know that it's a little bit less overwhelming just because it only has like, a menu bar and there's like 5 icons there. So it's really simple and intuitive to navigate. And it also allows for high fidelity prototypes, which is super helpful when you want to code something or make a project, maybe like a redesign that you might put in your portfolio or things like that. And it also allows you to like make the prototype straight in there and like add animations and things like that. So they also offer a lot of free plugins that you can find like on the internet. And then if you use those, it also can kind of extend some of the capabilities that you might see in Illustrator. But in that case, it makes it all central in like one platform with Figma, which is a nice pro. So some of the cons with Illustrator is that it's non-collaborative. You can't connect frames like you would in Figma if you were making like a prototype. It also has high costs, which is another reason why I love Figma, is because it's free, which means it's accessible. So it's super easy to kind of like log in. You don't have to like sign up for anything or like subscription based. But then some of the cons of Figma is that it is more limited in illustration and visual design. But if you are just starting out, and especially if you're making like a UI prototype, then Figma really is the best way to go. I love Figma and I kind of swear by it. So yeah. Other prototyping softwares that you might use, ones that I've used personally, I've used InVision a little bit more than Sketch, but I like InVision because it's like completely free. So you can do like a little bit more like advanced animation and micro interactions in it than like Figma might allow you to. So you could build, like your frames that you might put in like a UI in either Illustrator or Figma. You can export those and then throw them into one of these softwares to kind of help make that fully flushed animations or interactions that you might want to put in like also your portfolio. So now I'll hand it off to Anna, who can talk a little bit more about her internship and work experience and kind of like industry standards there.
Cool. So hi guys, my name is Anna. I am the design director for UX at UW. So just to quickly talk about like what kind of prototyping softwares I've used in a couple of my internships in the past year or two. So in my first one at a startup, they didn't have like a preference for honestly like what prototyping like tool I would use. So at that time, I used Adobe XD. It's part of like the Adobe Creative Cloud family, and I just use that because like I had the the free Adobe Creative Cloud subscription for like a year from just participating in like one of the Adobe Creative Jams hackathon. Like I think that was 2 summers ago, but I don't think they have it anymore. So at that time I just had that. So I was like, okay, I'll just use that, try it out. I think at first I liked it. It was really like clean and it felt really like similar to Figma. But one thing I noticed that when I tried to like show my files to like my PM or like my manager, I had to like export it as like a PDF. So it wasn't really like collaborative in a way. And they couldn't really like access it in like by just like sending them a link because it's really limited to people who pay for the Adobe Creative Cloud. So I think I only use it for that. And then since then I switched to Figma for pretty much the rest of my internships. I think yeah, it was just really limiting. So I did switch over. And then I did find out Figma was more collaborative and it's just easier to share your links just for even like critiquing and commenting. And then so from like what I've heard from other people, I think Axure and Figma, so they're really popular used in the industry among like even brands like Twitter. I think Microsoft and GitHub and Dropbox use them. So yeah, that's kind of what it is. And then next slide. So what should I use? Okay, so I think going back into like what should I use? I think it's just use to like stick with whatever you're comfortable with and like have access to because it just makes things like easier for you and like the project you're working on, or you're like in your class or like with your teammates. So, but just like be prepared to like keep in mind and like you might need to like shift gears a little bit depending on what company you work for in the future. Like they might want you to use like Axure or something just because it really depends on the team. But for now, like something like Figma is just really pretty good just because it's really accessible and like a lot of companies right now, they do use it, I believe. And next slide. I think so for the rest of the hour, we'll be kind of hopping onto a quick Figma intro with some tips and tricks, and we'll end with a Q&A at the end if you guys have any questions. Next slide. And then I think I'll probably kind of introduce Dorothy Kim a little bit. So she's like my friend in our product design mentorship cohort. So Dorothy, I'll have you like talk about yourself a little bit, and if you want to take over, start screen sharing.
Okay, yeah, sure. Yeah, I can actually just start right away. A little bit of my intro is actually in my slides. So, but for everyone who wants to follow along so that they can learn it or play with it at the same time as I discuss it, I made a community file so that anyone, if they want, they can click on that link that I just sent out in the chat and they can duplicate it. So they have a copy of the same file that I'm about to share and share on the screen with y'all. So let me share my screen. Okay. 1 second. Okay, can everyone see the screen here that I have with just the Figma introduction tips and tricks? Okay, sweet. Okay, so if you click that duplicate and it should open it a draft file for you and it should look just like this. So if you go over to your pages corner over here and go to the slides / follow along or plus follow along, this is the where that you can follow along and hopefully be a little bit more interactive. And that way you guys can figure out how to, I guess, use these tips and tricks as we go along. So yeah, really quickly, let me hide my sidebars, which I will tell you in a couple slides here. Let me move on. So a little bit about me. So I actually used to be a software engineer. I used to work and do tech for about 6 years before I felt more or less, I guess, empty in what I was doing. I felt like I just kept making products and without any meaning or any value in it. And when I started asking questions around like, why are we coding this out over here versus over there? Or like, why are we setting it up this way versus that way? And when I went up the chain in my company and started asking all these questions, and the answers that they gave me wasn't really good enough, in my opinion. And so I went into a little deep dark hole of searching and into the UX black hole here of just user experience, design, and I found product design, and I resonated a lot with it and did a lot of extracurricular work outside of work. And I found myself doing multiple boot camps, doing multiple activities outside. There's just too many. And including the one that I actually met Anna in. And yeah, here I am now. So I somehow convinced my company to actually open a design branch and made it sound, I guess, interesting enough and more worthwhile to actually do design and advocate for it, so that they can not only grow as a company, but also we can be competitive at the same time. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. I also do a little bit of UX advocacy on the side, a little bit of volunteer mentoring at design.org. However, I am on hiatus. It's been a hot minute since I last did that. Yeah, that's a little bit about me. A little fun fact, I am pretty much obsessed at the moment with Animal Crossing DLC, Happy Home Paradise. It is what I've been doing for quite the last 2 months. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. Does anyone have any other questions before I move on? Really quickly? No? Okay, cool. Well, we'll get right into the workspace and navigation of Figma. So really quickly, as you can see here, the workspace, if you guys can see, it's really divided into 4 parts. There's a giant toolbar, that's the black bar on top there. The left sidebar, which is on the left side, the right sidebar on the right side. And everything else in the middle is pretty much your canvas. And I can elaborate a little bit more as we go on into the next few slides here. So the canvas itself, so if I were to unhide, so I'm using this command actually, command / to unhide my actual panels and my toolbar so that you can actually see where the canvas is. So sometimes when you're working and you get a little cramped and you go like, oh gosh, it's like, I want to zoom in, but I want to see everything still. It's a really neat trick to just do, at least I have a Mac, so I can do command / and you can actually see my whole panel and see that it just feels so much more spacious as you go on and do all that jazz. So pretty much the canvas is the entire open space to literally view and do your work. The left sidebar. So the left sidebar on your left-hand side, there's 2 panels. There's a layers panel and an assets panel. So the layers panel is divided into 2 parts, more or less. There's the pages part and then a list of panels part. I apologize for a lot of background noise there. And the pages part, though, is basically all the different workspaces that you can have within one file. And literally the layers section is just all your different design objects that you've made within the workspace. So it could be frames, which is denoted by these pound signs. It could be shapes. It could be groups, which is denoted by this like dash square thing. But pretty much it's all different parts of the inside, whatever's inside of that current workspace's canvas is what will come up in this layer section here. So there's that. And then the asset panel, if you look over here, is denoted by several parts as well. Actually, let me unhide my section here. Maybe it's a little better. Oh, it doesn't show. It's okay. Well, so there's 3 different parts of the asset panel if you have them. There's a local components section I used in this file section and a library section. So local components, if you guys don't know what components are basically pre-made items that someone made a while back, and they can save it as a component, and you can use that component anywhere else. And sometimes people make libraries of these like components, and they put it on for public use, and it's neat because you can just go and grab it. So for example, in this picture here, I actually have a library to an icon set that someone made. I think this is Material UI, which is what Google uses. So it's just neat. Someone's already made them for you. You can just go grab that library, and then you can pick out whichever one that someone pre-made and then actually use it in your designs. So this panel is very nifty when you want to manage and look for them. So it has this neat search bar. You can look whichever one you want in there. So that's pretty nice. A couple hotkeys that I like using about this layer and asset panel is pretty much option for Macs. It's option 1, I believe it's Alt 1 or 2. So pretty much if I want to go back to layers, if you guys pay attention over here, I go 1, it goes back to layers. I type option 2, it goes back to assets. I can toggle between each one pretty quickly. And it just helps me, I guess, keep my hands on the keyboard and move a little bit faster, if you know what I mean. So there's the left sidebar and the right sidebar. So let me hide this so it doesn't get confusing. So the right sidebar here is a little bit more complicated. It's depending on whichever design object that you have selected, it pretty much gives you the options on how to manipulate it manually on that right hand side. So for example, let me actually, yeah. So right now I just clicked on my frame, which is the slide, and I typed R, and then I'm just making a rectangle inside of this frame so I can show you guys what I'm about to do with the design panel here. It will look confusing because there's double, but bear with me. So basically, if I'm holding onto this, let me make it red so you guys can see it a lot better. So I'm holding onto the red rectangle right now. I can use the alignment. So it's descripted here, but pretty much this is the alignment bar. You can align to the left, align to the side here. Sorry, this is in relation to, yeah. It's aligned to the middle, aligned to the right, aligned to the top, middle from the vertical side, and then to the bottom. So there's that. You can also see that if I am from the X and Y, you can maneuver it through X and Y axis as well. Y obviously being top to bottom. So sorry, if I hold my shift down, it will actually keep that in alignment. You can just see the Y only moving. And then if I push to the right, you only see the X moving. So that's the alignment over here. And then you can see also the WH, which is width and height. You can change the width and height if you want. Let's say I made this 100 or maybe 200 to make it more drastic for you. If you actually click this is constraint proportions, it'll keep it proportionate. So that way, if you do 400, it'll grow proportionately. This is degree of rotation. So if you pay attention to that number, as I rotate it, you'll see it moving. And then if I give it a radius, so this is border radius, I don't know, make it drastic here so you can see. You can actually see the radius on my rectangle actually curve in. And this actually lets you go in more detail for which corner to go in this box. Let's say this one was 30. So you actually see the top right just got squished a little bit more than the rest. Oops. So there's that. So now if you go down this list here, you can see the layer section. The layer section lets you be able to adjust the opacity of the object that you selected so you can actually see through it or not. The fill actually just tells you what color it is that's filled into the object currently, which is in this case green. And then the stroke obviously is the stroke on the side, and affects this drop shadow, and export basically allows you to export it if it's a frame to any, I believe, any one of these 4 file types: PNG, JPEG, SVG, PDF. Okay, that was a little thorough, but and a neat trick also to get to the design panel very quickly is the option 8 or Alt 8 hotkey. I'll show that after. I described this part. So the other two panels on the right-hand side here is a prototype and inspect panel. Prototype is pretty much, it will help you, I guess, make fake mockups or fake prototypes of like apps, and it'll help you implement those interactions. Yeah, and the inspect panel is primarily for the developers. Once you deliver your product or your designs, they can actually go in here into Figma themselves, click on an item, go to the inspect, and actually see how to actually code it up as they, like it tells them the typography that's being used, the color, and the code. So that's kind of more helpful for them. But the only time when you interact with it is like if they need help looking for it, you can direct them there. At least that's how I've been using it. Yeah. Oh, and to just really quick show you guys the hotkeys for this is, so for me, since I have a Mac, it's option 8 to go back to design. So if you guys look over here, design, 9 for prototype, 0 inspect. So it's just nice to go back and forth if you are in between one or the other. Finally, we're at the last portion of the workspace, which is the toolbar. So the toolbar is nicely and kept up top, but it's definitely very robust in what it can do. In these 7 tools, it's like a nice 7 categories, more or less. You can do a lot of things. Really quickly to show you, you can, it's nice because it shows you the hotkeys to the right over here of which one it is. So you can do move, you can scale, you can do frame, you can make frames, which is like basic rectangle art boards. You can slice those up using S. This is your shape tool, pretty much very generic shapes, and you can even add in images here as well. Pen and pencil. I think this is the text tool. This is the panning tool, which is nice. Basically, you can pan if your navigation isn't as simple. A simple way also to get to this. So if I'm on a different tool, I can touch space bar and it pans for me, and that way I can let go and it goes automatically back to what I was on before. And the last one is comments. So comments is really good if you are working on a team, for sure. So that, for example, if I have to work my PMs and my devs, I can just tag them using those comments and say, hey, does this look feasible to you? Or like, hey, does this hit requirements? And then that can, they can comment there like, oh, yes or no, So it's like a collaborative option here for the comments. Okay, so that's pretty much the overview for the workspace and a little bit about navigation. So tips and tricks. So let me just hide those over there. We don't need those as much anymore. I think we'll get there. Okay, so deep select. Okay, one thing I really liked, or I found really cool when I first started was when I first came in, I was like, oh yeah, I want to just be able to click something actually like it instead of clicking the overall parent of it. So for example, that's actually a good reason why I should keep this open. So if I click on it right away, so here. So if I click, for example, let's say I wanted that text, search or workspaces for pages with comma groups. If I wanted that text and I click on it, I wouldn't be able to because it clicks the parent of it in the layer options over here. So to bypass that, if you can just hold command and it'll actually deep select anything that you hover over. It feels so nice when I found this out. So that way, if I click on it, it actually, if I hold command and I hover over and I just click on it, you can see that it clicked right into what I wanted right away. So that was pretty neat. And that was command hover over and select whichever one. So that's deep select. Another thing I actually really profess is box modeling and naming things as you go. Because, oh my gosh, you'll thank yourself later if you actually start practicing this now. Because things get messy when you start working with multiple people, you start building design systems that are really robust. And I made the mistake of never, when I first started, I never box modeled. I never named things as I go. And everything was just completely messy. For example, so this over here is bad example of no like box modeling and no naming. So if I click on this, you'll see in the actual item or the layer panel that nothing is grouped, nothing is named. You just see like the raw items as they are, at least some of them. And then what's it called? It's hard to make out what is what. However, if you box model as you go, for example, like I put this in a frame as I started. I typed my text and then I put it in a frame, and I basically just kept framing things, frame until like they're all in boxes. So if you see it as I hover over, you see that it's nice and neat. Like the text comments are in a box, and then the what's it called? The action buttons are in a box, and then all of that is encompassed by another box. And it's very neat. And when you start using auto layout, you'll thank yourself because it'll be a lot neater as you start learning how to do that more proficiently. But that's pretty much my 2 cents on that. Like try your best or do your best to try to, as you frame and box things together, it'll just be more convenient as it goes. And anyways, when you actually code everything out, everything is in boxes. So the devs would also find it a lot more easier to read your work as well. So highly recommend. Oh, and really quickly, if you want to go really optimally and clean and fast, these are some really key hotkeys for you to know as well. So for example, let's say I type F, which is really the hotkey for framing. And let's say I make a frame here. And or actually, no, I did not do that. Sorry, let's say I make a rectangle R. I typed in R and I made a rectangle. And let's say I wanted to, name it. So I just Command R, and that's, if you see here, it just automatically started my text here. And I can just say, my new object. I just name it that. And then now that it's in there, I can actually frame it too as I go. So the hotkey for framing things is on the Mac is Option Command G. So now it's in a frame, and then I can also name it as I go. So I'm doing Command R and say, my new frame. So that's so just as long as you just keep things clean and like make sure that you are naming things, actually, because it's rectangle, you technically don't need to name it sometimes. It depends on the situation, but I don't know. I like keeping it shapes if it's actually what it is. But yeah, it depends per designer. It's up to you how you design, organize your workspace. But the more people that get involved into your stuff, the easier it will be if it's organized already and they don't have to sift through your work to understand everything. Okay, so there's that. So mass renames. Okay, so this was pretty awesome for me. Let's say, okay, let me just give you a good example. I was going to use the actual slides within there, but I'm just going to use all of my slides here, or actually the top portion. Okay, so let's say I named all these bad, right? As you can see, they're all named wrong, actually. They're all the wrong names. And let's say I wanted to rename them all. I can do the Command R that I just showed you guys in the last thing. And you can see here, now it can give me the option to rename them. So let's say I want to rename them UX, UW, event slides. And what's neat too is that it gives you the option to add an ascending number. So you can actually have your slides or your frames numbered as they go. So I'll rename them. And as you can see, they have been numbered as in order, and in the order actually of how they are set up in the layers. So as you can see, it went from 1 all the way down to, yeah, it goes from 1 to 9. So that's nice and convenient. So I like that a lot, especially when I needed to clean up my work for other people to come in and start using it for other things. So the next hotkey, next thing that I think is very useful is duplicate. So I'm an anime fan, so I really like Naruto, but we're gonna clone him now. So there's 3 main ways to clone things in Figma. There's the normal copy paste with the Command C or Control C and the Control paste, or sorry, Control V. So I'll do that now. Control copy, Control C, Control V, Command V, sorry. I have a Mac, what am I saying? And then I will do a Command D to duplicate it, Command D. And then I have an Option drag as well. So I'm holding down Option and I'm dragging as I go. What's neat about Option is that you can see the distance it is in orange between each other as you hold that down. But yeah, that's pretty much how you duplicate the normal way. And now to actually do mass duplicate. So let's say you're working many frames and you edited one small thing, but now you have to apply it to all the other frames, which stinks, right? Let's say, oh, I just moved this over here, right? Let's say I moved Naruto a little up here, right? So I'm gonna select the main frame that it's within first, and then select the object, copy it, select all the frames that I want him in, and then paste. So he is in the exact same place and all those other frames, if all those other frames are the same size. So it's really nice and convenient when you're doing prototyping, and that happens. So that's pretty cool. Resizing. So I don't know if you guys ever did this, but when I was a beginner, I didn't know how to like resize things properly. So I would always just try to like click a corner and just continue dragging. And I'm like, no, why is it not working? But if you just click K, which is the scale tool, you can actually just resize it, the whole thing, without it like, the reason why it does that in the first place is because the constraints are off. I don't know if you guys noticed, but in the design panel, there's like a constraints thing that pops up every now and then. If those aren't set up properly, you will see what you just saw, which is like everything not sticking to the sides. But if you do the scale, you don't have to worry about that. So that's nice. So there's also incidences too, where when I was starting, I remember I would somehow have an outer layer frame that's smaller than the actual contents within it, like this. So that I just click the parent right here, and it just, as you can see, is smaller than the actual stuff inside of it. And every time I try to, oh wait, before I, let me get out of the scaling tool really quick. Okay, so I select the parent here and I try to resize it or make it bigger to encompass the rest that's inside, and it doesn't let me because the constraints are off. And so I'm like, how do you avoid that? If you just hold down Command or Control, it'll let go of those constraints and it'll allow you to resize it. And this saved me so much time. Oh my gosh. I was so happy when I found that out. Okay, the next tip. The next tip is, oh yeah, so copy style. So this is actually really common in a lot of apps. I didn't know this until I looked it up. But basically, if you see you're working really fast in Figma, you don't really have a design system, but you just want to work quickly in terms of like getting your font styles in, you can just click on your preferred text, like the style, color, and font size, and just say, oh, that actually is like what I want, right? You can do Option Command Copy or Option Command C. And then now I'm going to actually do a deep select on Shift, so I can click multiple texts here. So I can collect all my text and then do a Command V, and now all of the text styles are updated. And it's nice when you're working quick and you just want something done really quickly. And you don't have to, do all the fancy stuff like setting up styles and all that jazz in Figma. So there's that. That's nice and neat. Implicit grid. So for those of you who don't know who implicit grid is, how do I say this? The implicit grid is based off an idea that a lot of different web design is based off of grid systems. And a lot of those grid systems go by the 4x8 or 16 pixel, 12 to 16 pixel count. So what I mean by that is everything is by multiples of 4 or multiples of 8. So what's interesting is if you look at it in this example here. So this is, each one of these rectangles is based off of, this is 4 pixels, 8 pixels, 12 pixels, 16. And everything's spaced nicely because they follow that rule of multiples of 4. So for example, this margin here is 40. This over here is 16. The in between all of these is 8, and so on and so forth. So everything, if you follow this rule of implicit grid, you will notice a lot of your design starting to level up real fast. And when I started doing this a lot more often is when I realized that not only is it a lot easier for the devs to read your stuff, it will also make your stuff look a lot hotter and a lot nicer, if you know what I mean. So definitely a big level up in visual design. And what's also a good way to actually check the spacing between things is holding down Option or Alt. So if you hold down Option here, as I think I explained it really quickly earlier, you can see these orange grid lines pop up, and it tells you the distance this object is from the corners of the stuff. If you hover your mouse over different items, it'll give you the distance between those different items. So as you can see, this is 64 between that, and then this is 64 between those. So it's nice and neat when you want to know how to, far things are between each other. So that's pretty nice. And now for the next thing is Big Nudge. So basically every time you, for example, if I use that option thing here, the distance between this and the image is pretty much like nothing, right? And if I use my arrow keys, it'll go 1 pixel to the side. As you can see, I'm clicking once, twice, 3 times, and let me reset that. So that's with my arrow keys once. If I hold Shift and then use my arrows, it grows by 8, or actually on default, actually grows by 10. But I actually used this edit, or I edited my nudge amount. So the way you edit it is you go to your Figma icon, you go to preferences, you go to nudge amount, and you set it to 8 or 16 or whatever grid system that your developers are using, or your API is using, or their API is using. And that is going to make your life a little easier, because when you use your arrows to click, it's already doing it for you. You don't have to like check your pixels all the time. And at least for me, it saved me a lot of time. There are some people though that don't like fixing the default nudge, the 10 pixels, because they like working in tens for some reason, and they just do it by hand. But I guess I'm the type that likes the 8. So it just saves me a lot of time. So that way, like if I want to edit this, so Big Nudge is actually not touching, I'll just hold Shift now, and I just tab, and then I'll just have confidence that it's a multiple 8. And that way I don't have to worry too hard about it. And yeah, so that's pretty much the last of my tips and tricks. Hopefully that was long enough. I wasn't sure how long this should have lasted exactly, but let me know if you guys have any questions or if that was hard to follow along with. But yeah, that's pretty much it, what I have today.
I swear by Implicit Grid.
Yes.
Implicit Grid and a box model made my life so much easier.
Yes.
But yeah, are there any questions?
Thank you so much, Dorothy. Oh my gosh, I just did a hackathon, and if I knew some of these things like before, I feel like that would have saved me so much time. Like you were so right with like the like renaming and like the box model, like that will save you so much trouble, because like when we were like building our thing, there were like times when I was like sifting through like 50 frames trying to like find one specific one so I could change like the background color, and it was like a mess. But yeah, definitely super helpful tips.
Oh yeah, no problem. Yeah, I had horror stories, I have to say. I had to sift through other people's work and organize it, and that was such a very sad experience for me. I think I took a whole week organizing people, because the only way to make a design system is to make it clean and make it right so the devs can read it. And I'm like, oh no, if I want to do this right, I have to go through like thousands of layers. This is ridiculous, but it's such a horror story. And now I just like remember now. Just name it.
That was like me, but with like my own work. So I can only imagine if I were to pass it off to someone else, like I would just, I don't know, I'd be so sorry for them.
Yeah.
Yep. Did anyone else have any other questions, not just about Figma, but anything else? Like I'm totally open.
I'm also curious, Dorothy, do you want to talk about your not what's it called, your Figma case study that you worked on in that product design mentorship program? I mean, it's kind of related.
Yeah, it is. It's pretty much. So, as some of you know, I met Anna through a program, a product design program outside of school, and I focused on a case study about Figma, and I more or less focused on the collaboration that happens within Figma. So during my initial research, I found that even though designers loved it, there's people that hated it. And the people that hated it were PMs and devs. They wouldn't want to even try to get in if they didn't. If they didn't need to, they'd stay away. And they're out of like all of my research, I found out that pretty much they were intimidated by the whole hefty load. It's such a, complex application. They just don't know how to navigate it initially. And they find they're very time-oriented type of people. And so if it takes them more than 5 to 10 minutes, that's their window and they're done. They're like, okay, this is taking too much time. I can't allot any more time. I'm done. Right. And then I'll just ask my designer for it later, or I'll ask for screenshots for it later. And that's kind of like how it went. And the case study that I developed was I tried to more or less make that experience a little bit more friendlier, a little bit more easy. And the part that actually is related is the box model portion, because if designers kept their workspaces a little bit more, what's it called, easier to read, a little cleaner, more different collaborators coming in wouldn't find such a hard time looking for things. For example, like some of the devs that I worked with had a really hard time sifting through my work because not only did I not name it properly, it just wouldn't come up like where it should be. It was like, all the way on the like left corner or right corner of the workspace. And they're like, I don't know how to like navigate through all of this. And like they had problems with the panning because some of them had Mac, some of them had PC. So yeah, it was a very interesting case study, and I learned a lot about how people, their internal motivations and what makes them want to, work in an application or a tool. So that was very helpful. I hope that was what you were hoping for me to say, Anna.
Oh, no, that makes sense. I think, I feel like part of it is like on us designers. If we were to like just keep our workspaces cleaner, then it would make it easier for them to find what they're looking for. So yeah. Oh, in the comments, I think people are asking.
Oh,
well, I'll send your LinkedIn. This is her LinkedIn, by the way. I'll send it.
Oh, yeah, of course.
Yeah,
feel free to add me. Just mention where you met me. And then that way I can have an idea where I can understand and like conversate around. But yeah, feel free to add me and ask about anything anything. I'm always down for talks. Oh, also, what do you mean by developer? Yes, software development or developer. I used to be a dev or developer. Yeah.
I'm curious to know what you do like more on a day-to-day basis, like and like what like the comparing your life like as a software developer to like a product designer now, like if you want to compare that.
I guess as a developer, I was very much an individual contributor, like an IC, which is pretty much they give me what to do and I do it with no questions. I just do it and then I have to finish it within a lot of time. That was my life for like 6 years, and it got really boring really fast. And there wasn't a lot of like space for creativity, and I guess I'm a creative person, so I tended to like navigate towards those type of things. I would try to like find spaces where I could like work on wireframes or like do all those other things. But my life now as a designer, I guess if I were to describe my everyday process, and the difference is that I work ahead of the developers about 2 or 3 sprints. Sometimes, 2 or 3 sprints about, so that all of my design work is ready for them when they're ready to take it on. And then how my communication between that, how that works is So when I'm done with my designs and it's approved by the lead engineer and lead PM, they put it in the devs tickets. And then once the dev's ready, they'll schedule a meeting with me to do a design kickoff. And then I'll start discussing to them like what's expected out of this document that I handed over, like my Figma document. And like, okay, and then they'll tell me like if when they're coding it, if there's any discrepancy, so I can keep my document up to, I guess, compliance, like the same, making sure it looks the exact same as the code. And there's definitely times when you want to push back and go like, oh, can't you find a way to get, this to work or that? And but there's in coding world, there's always going to be some weird nif thing here or there that's always going to prevent them to make it look like the best it can be. So yeah, that's kind of like how I navigate around that now. Does that make any sense? Let me know if I answer your question.
Yeah, definitely. That's super cool. There's another question in the chat actually. And someone was seeing that like on your LinkedIn, you say that you're a UXE or user experience engineer, and like, can you explain the difference between that and like a UX designer?
Yeah, so because of my past experience as a dev or developer engineer, I primarily manage my company's design systems. So design systems are the kind of like the libraries and components that you make for the devs. And I just make sure that if the dev needs me, I can code that up each of those components so they're ready for it. So like if I code it up and I have it in like a file for them, they can actually take it and like they can just put it in like, into the code, like I'll put that there, or put that there. Like it's a lot easier for them to do that instead of like spending the extra time making it if they don't have the time. And because I work at a small company, a lot of people usually wear many hats. So
would you say that it's like, you could say that it's like a UX designer, but with, I guess, a more technical background?
Yes, I would say someone who manages and implements, I guess, design system components. Technically, that's what that does. UX engineers, they usually try to take whatever the UX designer gives them, like the actual designs, and they'll create those components, those Lego pieces, so that devs can take those Lego pieces and make houses. Does that make sense?
Yeah, definitely.
Mm-hmm. Wait, I'm also curious, like, how do you think having like a technical, like, I guess like dev background helps you design today, and if there's any impact?
Yeah, I guess it helps me a lot because I have an idea of what's feasible or not. It helps me get a lay of the land more or less. Like I know I can't, design something that looks like a cloud button or something, that's a little bit unrealistic. Because like devs work in boxes, you're asking a dev to make a cloud with a box. That's like kind of impossible. Or here, it's gonna look janky like Minecraft, so it's kind of like that. I kind of have an idea. It helps because I have an idea of what kind of works or not, and I also can talk their lingo. So because I went to school for computer science, I know like what error cases are. I know how to like design for error cases. Like let's say, the network's not working one day. what does that screen look like? What is that? How do you design that screen? Is it a 404 page? Is it gonna be like a little snack bar that pops up and goes like, internet connections off, please check your internet connection. Like what level of interruption will you give the user? So I guess that helps me figure out, like, understand and remember all the different cases that can occur. Because I know as a new designer, you're not exposed to all those different things as easily. So that kind of helps because devs really like seeing, what to do if they see an error case.
Basically, devs, they try to build things like piece by piece, not like the whole thing at once.
Oh yeah, that too.
Yeah, that too. You taught me about that. You were like trying to help me with the MVP in our project.
Yeah, so that's a little bit more like project roadmap stuff. Yeah. So if you want me to elaborate on that a little bit, it's like devs like to kind of like there's like states of iteration of a product. You start by making a scooter, right? Or a skateboard or a scooter first, and then you'll eventually get to the car. You'll start with the scooter, and then you get to the bike, and then you'll get to a motorbike, and maybe you'll evolve into like one of those like pedal cars, and then like slowly but surely you'll eventually get to a car. But devs like to work in those type of increments. Something that works, right? They'll get you to your goal, but it's kind of janky at first, and it'll slowly get less janky as it goes. Like the polish will come. That's how they like to iterate. Function over stuff.
Cool.
Oh, well, thank you so much again for coming in. I think that was super helpful. Like I came a lot out with like a bunch of new tips and tricks that I definitely will use. So thank you so much for your talk and like your amazing presentation and answering questions.
Those look really nice, by the way. Did you make them?
Yeah.
Holy crap, really?
Well, I recycled them from my case study. Do you remember?
Right.
In my case study, I also made slides and I kind of jazz it up. So that's what this is like.
I mean, it looks super cool. So thank you for that. I guess to everyone else hanging out, we do like after every meeting, we do open up the space if you guys want to hang out and get either some feedback on like your resume or like portfolios. It's just kind of like an open time to chat if you guys have any more design questions. So feel free to stick around for that. And if so, then we'll be here if you guys have those questions, and we can kind of answer that and like go into breakout rooms if we need to. But yeah, other than that, then that's the end of the presentation today. So thank you guys for coming.
Dorothy, thank you so much. Everybody's so much